Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Brenna Jean, a future doctor, and today we're going to talk about how I studied for the MCAT as a working adult. If you aren't following me on Instagram, follow me at BrennaJFutureDoc. Of course, like this video if you like what you see today, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more just like it. Let's go! Now, to provide a little bit of context, this is why I say working adult. I did not take the MCAT until January after I graduated from undergraduate. So I was working full-time, as it still am, as a project manager at a tech company. So I had to balance my studying with working a full-time job. Now, the reason I ended up taking the exam in January kind of leads into my first big point. When it comes to studying, you want to make sure that you have kind of a goal in mind for yourself. Now, if you're someone who can set yourself goals without having an exam scheduled, that's great. Good for you. For me, my accountability was actually having that exam date set in stone and ready to go. That way I didn't have any excuses. Well, funny thing about that. So when I first scheduled the exam, I was in my senior year of college, and I was like,
I know my semesters are going to be super busy, but I should really try and take it sooner rather than later so the information's fresh.
So I scheduled it for June of 2018, or right after I would graduate. And yeah, that was not my brightest decision. So when you are scheduling that exam, if you need that to be your kind of accountability partner, so to speak, make sure you're being realistic about setting enough time aside for studying. I was so busy in school. I was in 20 credits both semesters of my senior year. I was on leadership for a few different organizations that I was really passionate about. Long story short, I did not have enough time to study for the MCAT on top of my daily classes and responsibilities. So what I ended up doing is I scheduled my exam for January of 2019. And what this allowed me to do is starting in August, after I had settled into my new job and a new city, I was able to look at my availability outside of work and figure out what a realistic timeline would be for me to get all of my studying done. So I set the exam date based on, what I thought I could dedicate each week. And then that was it. I had my goal. I wasn't going to reschedule it, and I was going to do everything in my power beforehand to make sure I got adequate studying in and ready to go. Perfect. So once you have your exam scheduled, then you can build a schedule. And there's a few different ways that you can do this. So I'll talk you through the two methods that I ended up using. So the first time I scheduled my exam for the June date, I had a set of Kaplan MCAT prep books from one of my friends. And what I did is I went through every single chapter in each book, and I kind of wrote down how many chapters there were and what the content sections were. And then I basically just took a calendar from, I think it was winter break right before 2018 to June. And I said, okay, this week I'm going to do these chapters, and this week I'm going to do these chapters, and kind of set goals for, which books I was going to complete by when. I typically mixed up content so I wouldn't get too bored. The second time, so after I rescheduled it, did not take it in June, rescheduled it for January, what I did then was I purchased a prep course because I had heard that they were really helpful in helping you study. And I knew for me, since I wasn't in school, since it wasn't an official class, it would be a great way for me to stay accountable, is having kind of a set course dictating, this is kind of when you should have this stuff done, and here's some extra resources and stuff like that. So using Next Step's scheduling tool, it was basically the same thing, but it was an easier interface. When I had done it myself, it was just like on an Excel spreadsheet. And in Next Step, it was like a drag and drop which chapters you're going to read or which study questions you're going to do when. So typically what I ended up doing is I tried to front load a lot of the reading and just note-taking type work. And then as time wore on, you naturally wanted to sprinkle in practice questions, practice exams, question banks, things that would start testing your knowledge on things that you had read and taken notes on. As far as a week in the life of me studying, what it would typically look like is Monday through Friday, I would probably only spend about 1 to 2 hours a night studying. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but I not only had work, I had things that I had to do after work, like meetings I had to attend or events I had to go to for recruitment for the business development program that I'm a part of. So I didn't really have a lot of time during the week to study. So I spent what time I could, and it was mainly reading through chapters, highlighting things, taking notes, kind of getting that content absorbed. And then on the weekends, I would typically spend anywhere from 4 to 6 hours studying. Again, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but 4 to 6 hours of studying MCAT straight can suck sometimes. And I'm not someone who likes to, I don't know if that's even a thing, but overstudy. I don't know. I definitely like to take it in chunks and take breaks because I didn't want to burn out. If you think about it this way, I was on a 6-month schedule for studying for the MCAT. So from August of 2018 to January of 2019, I was supposed to be studying for the MCAT. So I wasn't doing 8 hours a day, 6 hours a day. I was doing small increments to help me learn a little bit at a time and prevent me from getting burnt out by the material. As far as the methods of studying that I used, there's a few different things that I would recommend. So of course, there's your basic read the chapter, take notes, write down keywords, that sort of thing, and highlighting. I think that's always a good baseline. However, more effective study tools are those that really test your knowledge. So after you've gone through a chapter once, try and do the questions at the end, or try and draw out a difficult piece of anatomy that they might have been talking about. Or even if it was tables of, say, hormones or neurotransmitters or something like that, then I would draw out that table. And what you can end up doing is, if you have it drawn out, then you can cover things up as a way to study. You can just practice drawing, like for anatomy type things, you can practice drawing and labeling over and over again as a way to memorize. So those were really helpful methods for me to get my studying done. And then of course, if you're not familiar with this concept already, there's this concept of knowledge loss, or the fact that, the longer you spend away from a certain topic, the faster and faster you lose that information. So a few hours after you learn something, of course, you're gonna have a lot easier time recalling it than, say, a day or two later, where the amount of knowledge that you'll have retained will have decreased by 50 to 60%. So the way to do that is kind of a recurrent study pattern for certain topics, especially ones that are brand new to you or really hard to study. I think if you're familiar with like Anki, I haven't used it yet, but from what I've learned of other people, it kind of does this similar thing. I think Quizlet does it as well now. But it's the idea where once you've seen something, you won't see it again for a day, but then you'll see it again the next day. And if you get it all right, then you give yourself a few days. And if you get it all right after a few days, then you won't see it again for a week. So it's phasing out the testing of that knowledge to make sure that you're really retaining it. And every time you come back and do that review a little bit longer, it brings that knowledge right back up to where you need it to be. Hopefully that made sense. So that's a really good method. I use that a lot when I was in school and learning, and it's very helpful when it comes to the MCAT, especially if you're on a kind of longer timeline, so you have an opportunity to go back to content over time. All right, and of course, the biggest piece that I used when I was studying was practice tests. That being said, I only took 2 practice tests, but even those were really helpful. If you approach a practice test the right way, then it's even more beneficial. So I approached it from starting it at the exact time that the exam would start, taking the full amount of breaks that they allot you, bringing the same food that I would eventually bring to my exam day. I think I had like peanut butter and jelly and strawberries. And then wearing, this is more myth, but wearing the same clothes that you're gonna wear on your exam day, so comfortable clothes with layers. And just really mimicking that testing experience as much as you can, because it not only prepares you for the content and, you know, figuring out what that pace is going to look like, but also builds up your stamina. That's a long time that you're sitting, testing. Yes, you get a few breaks, but you're kind of in that mindset the whole time. So practice exams are really helpful for that as well. What I will say is that my practice exams were pretty representative of my actual exam too. So for my first practice exam, I think I got like a 504, and my second one I got a 509, and then my actual MCAT score was a 508. So you can see they're kind of right around there. I did take both practice exams towards the end of my studying. If you have the time and the opportunity to, I would recommend you take more than I did and spread out throughout your studying so that you can really see your progress as you go. I think the only thing that really kept me from taking more practice exams was what I said earlier, where, you know, not only did I have work, I had an outside commitment as well that took up a lot of time. And so just, you know, being realistic, I really didn't have that many free Saturdays or Sundays to be able to take a practice exam. So I did the best that I could, and that was 2. Well, I think that's pretty much it as far as the methods I used to study. Hopefully a little bit of this was helpful to you. When it comes down to it, just building a schedule and sticking to it is so important when it comes to MCAT studying. It's hard. We all know that. Like, nobody likes studying for a test. So just really sticking to a schedule or a plan, or if you like a task list, whatever you do to hold yourself accountable, do that and stick to it as much as possible, because not only will it help prepare you sooner, but it'll just make you feel better about the exam come exam day. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for joining me. Of course, if you aren't already, please subscribe to my channel to see more videos just like this. Like it if you liked the content. And yeah, that's all I got. So peace. I will see you next time. Bye.